Let's have a think about imposter syndrome and how it relates to the spoken word, because it's one of those strange things that depending on the situation you're in, who you're dealing with, how many people you're dealing with, it can have a big impact on mental state. I can think of a conversation just a few weeks ago with a client of mine in financial services who said, he made the point, he said, look, I've got a good number of years experience. I know my stuff. I'm a pretty confident guy. And yet, he said, with certain clients and with very senior people in my own firm, he said, I get all nervous. I stumble over my words. I second guess myself. He said, I don't speak with anything like the confidence that I know that I can speak. And this is something I think which is not unique to this particular client. It's something which you too may be able to relate to. I can certainly relate to it if I think back to the beginning of my career in corporate headhunting. I came in as an analyst, junior, graduate recruit, not knowing much about the world of enterprise software, dealing with very senior technology executives in software companies, IT services firms, and in private equity from time to time as well. And I found that really quite intimidating. Thank goodness most of those conversations were over the phone, so they couldn't see either how fresh-faced and young I was, nor how anxious I was in some of those conversations. The point is, there was a big gap between where I perceived myself to be and where they were at. So here's my suggestion as a way in which to deal with this mismatch, the sense of imposter syndrome. And it's this: choose your hat with care, by which I mean your identity hat, the hat you wear in any given moment that defines who you believe yourself to be. You see, in any given day, we will wear all sorts of different hats. Just today, I've worn my father hat, my husband hat, my son hat. That's S-O-N, family son rather than sunshine. Not a whole lot of sunshine in Britain in December. But I've also worn professionally my learner hat. I'm reading a book at the moment on the language of politics, so I'm absolutely in knowledge absorption mode. Yeah. And I've worn, as I do most days when I'm in a professional skills environment, my expert hat. Here's what I found. Different hats are, of course, more suitable for some situations than for others, of course. But what's also true is that some hats are far more empowering than others. If you work in a large organization, for example, chances are you will have a job title hat. If you've seen The West Wing, for example, Jed Bartlett, who is the president, the fictional president of the United States, makes a point of being addressed as Mr. President in the Oval Office. And he actually says in the show, and I think it's a wonderful insight, he says, given some of the decisions I have to make in this office, I find it easier to be addressed as the office rather than the person. So that's him making a very clear distinction between his personal hat, don't want that, I want the office of president hat, because some of those decisions are going to be so tough, because they may well involve threats to human life and so on, right? So some hats are much more empowering and helpful for us than others in some situations. So in my world, for example, over the years, I've worked with a very significant number of very senior people in C-suite roles, people with a public profile, people who are well known in their industry. And I have to be very, very careful in that environment as the coach working with them to ensure I'm wearing the right hat. Because given the level of experience, given the level of experience that they've got, it would be very easy for me to put them up there on the pedestal, right? And for me to be down here if I'm not very, very careful. So I make sure to put on my expert hat to help ensure that I come in as an equal. It's not about belittling the client. It's not about trying to be superior. It's ensuring that we come in equal, both having important value to bring to the dialogue. Now, for me, as you can imagine, very often my expert hat is characterized in my own head as my public speaking expert hat, because compared to most of my clients, I will have certainly as much, if not way more, public speaking experience on stage. I'm a practicing professional speaker. I've done my 10,000 hours and more over the years. But of course, there are some times where I might be dealing with someone who, by virtue of the amount of experience they've got and the type of work they do, may well have a really significant amount of public speaking experience as well. And so then I might sometimes tailor my expert hat to include not just public speaking experience, but also the thousands of hours I've got of experience helping other people to speak with greater impact. Right? So it's not just the on-stage experience, it's also the coaching, the facilitation, the conversations I've had, as well as workshops I run and masterclasses and so on. Because I know that pretty much no client I ever deal with will be able to compete with that. So I'll always be able to come in as an equal. right? Because the only people that can match the depth of experience that I've got in those two areas, on stage and in helping other people, will be peers of mine who have done their 10,000 hours on stage, and also have, realistically, they probably would have been working as speaker coaches either full time or certainly most of their time for at least a decade, probably more. And I know for a fact that's not many people. There are a few people with that experience, but they're not my clients, right? So you can tailor your expert hat to fit the situation that you're going into. Let me just give one final example of this that may resonate, either for you if you're in a junior role or if you are in a senior role, but with junior team members. A really useful, practical way to bolster the self-esteem and to help people to deal with imposter syndrome, particularly if they're at a more junior level, is to define that expert hat with care. So often, if I work with and deal with people at a very junior level, they'll say things like, well, I've only got a year's experience, and I'm dealing with, my boss has got 10 years experience, or I've got, divisional head has been in this industry for 20 years, 30 years. I can't compete with that. What can I possibly bring to the table? And as a result, they stay quiet. Yeah. Or what they're terrified of really contributing much for fear of saying something wrong, saying something stupid, or just saying something that people have already thought of. Well, consider for a moment how we can make that expert hat, how we can tailor it to be more meaningful. If you're in a very junior role, chances are your remit, your responsibility will be quite tightly defined, but as a result, you will build really meaningful expertise within that clearly defined area of responsibility. Right? If you're only a year into the industry, yeah, it's only a year, but in that time, you will have had conversations, you'll have meetings with people, you've worked on projects, you've read stuff, you'll have been exposed to trends or recent developments or recent insights, which would be impossible for people at a more senior level to have had access to, precisely because they're at a very senior level. Think of it from the opposite extreme. If you consider a C-suite executive in a large firm, or a figure in public life, a government minister or a prime minister, for example, they're responsible for so much. It's so enormous, their responsibility, that it's impossible for them to have a real meaningful grasp on most of what's going on. Right, you could be super experienced, but if you're the president of a nation, imagine how much stuff is going on in that nation that the president hasn't got the first clue about. It'd be impossible for any individual to have. Do you see what I mean? So in a more junior level, if you tailor that expert hat in the right way, you absolutely can come into a meeting with meaningful, credible expertise to bring to bear, because no one has had your exact experience. No one has gathered the precise knowledge and information and data and insights that you will have done, if only because it's so recent and specific. So choose your hat with care, because the identity that you adopt in your own mind will determine the gravitas and the authority that you bring to those important spoken communication situations. I hope this tip is helpful for you, and we'll speak soon.